Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We kindly invite you to enter Mangupura Hall and take your respective seats as our event will begin shortly. And please kindly fill in the front row first. As a courtesy to today's event, please switch off your mobile phone or switch it to silent mode. Food and beverages are not permitted inside Mangupura Hall except for drinks in tumblers that you bring with you. We also provide interpretation device that you can collect at the reception table near the entrance. For your information, Channel 1 is for English, Channel 2 for Bahasa Indonesia, Channel 3 for French, and Channel 4 for Spanish. Bapak Ibu, tamu undangan yang kami hormati, kami mengundang Bapak Ibu sekalian untuk memasuki Mangupura Hall dan menempati tempat duduk yang telah kami sediakan dan berkenan untuk mengisi bagian depan terlebih dahulu. Terima kasih. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the first thematic parallel session, Redoubling Business Actors' Participation in the Global Supply Chain. My name is Valerina Daniel and I'm honored to be your Master of Ceremony. To start this session, we would like to kindly invite His Excellency Bapak Pahala Nugraha Mansuri, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, to deliver his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome His Excellency Bapak Pahala Nugraha Mansuri.
Pak Arsyad Rashid, Chairman of Indonesia Chamber of Commerce, Kadin, all of the Minister, and also all of the distinguished panels, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to all of you. It is a pleasure for me to be able to speak in this very distinguished channel, the thematic session of the high-level forum or multi-stakeholders partnership on how are we going to discuss how to increase the participation on business actors in the global supply chain. This discussion, I think, is very timely and very relevant, as today we are witnessing increased fragmentation in the economic sphere. Right now, as we speak, global FDI is showing some trends to decrease. For example, in 2023, global foreign direct investment decreased by about 7 percentage points compared to the previous year. And we are also seeing similar trend in the area of global trade as well. Global trend is right now declining at a very similar rate, while at the same time there is a significant increase in trade restrictive measures, including those with environmental rationale, as we know as the green protectionism. Global growth, as a result of that, is projected to fall from 3.5% in 2022 to 3% in 2023 and 2024. In the long run, we are actually expecting that due to the economic fragmentation, it will cause the global economic output of about 7%. And due to all of this trend that we are actually seeing today, developing countries are the one that will be bearing most of the costs from this fragmentation. It is as if we are forced to pick sides of this geopolitical rivalry to benefit from the fragmentation. And we are actually seeing that there is a decreased international financial flows to significantly hamper our efforts in achieving our SDG targets. At the same time, we are seeing that developing countries and developing economies have many, many potentials. For example, in 2050, it is projected that emerging markets would grow twice as fast as the advanced economies. 6 out of 7 largest economies in the world are projected to be emerging economies by the year of 2050, including that of Indonesia. The world's population growth, ever slowing in some advanced countries, will rapidly increase in developing countries, and in short, developing countries are the future of the global growth. Developing countries are also endowed with rich natural resources, including oil and gas, biodiversity, marine resources, and more importantly, right now, as the world is seeing how are we going to be able to solve the climate issues, critical minerals are also one of the natural resources that will be the potential for us to be able to benefit fully from it. Now the question is, how are we in the developing economies are really going to be able to benefit fully from the natural resources that we have, including that from the critical minerals that we see. To leap forward and to be able to live up to these potentials, developing countries must move up the value chain and becoming a more important part of the global supply chain. Developing countries must not be confined merely as the producer and exporters of the raw materials. This is usually what is being called as we actually have the right to development. We have the right to be able to benefit from all of these natural resources that we have. Having said that, I would like to share with you 5 points that I think will be crucial for developing countries to enhance the participation of the business sectors. And more importantly, how are we going to be able to ensure that developing countries can be an important part of the global supply chain? First, how are we going to continue to foster better economic integration and greater market access? We should try to ensure that we reverse the current economic fragmentation that we are actually seeing today. In the increasingly fragmented world, developing countries must pursue greater integration, and so, including through establishing economic and trade agreement to facilitate greater market access. In the past, developing countries might perceive that they are competing with each other. They are producing the same commodities products and compete for the world's market. But now, we are the fastest growing markets. In fact, based on the IMF, emerging markets include that in Asia and Africa will grow more than 6.3% annually for the next 5 years. Africa will also be a large market with 1.5 billion population, and South Asia with 1.7 billion population. And just to give you an example, in Africa, it is expected that the population will come to about 2.5 billion population by the year of 2045. We will benefit from greater economic integration, which can reduce costs and create more efficient economy. We must focus on our complementarities and facilitate greater market access among developing countries. Unfortunately, right now, we are actually seeing not so much today. At the same time, we need to also collectively counter restrictions and barriers to trade and investment, including that coming from what is usually labeled as green protectionism. We need to actually communicate how are we going to be able to voice our concern about green protectionism. Second, ensuring a more resilient supply chain. We have learned the hard way from the recent disruptions that supply chain is absolutely critical for the economy to thrive. Developing countries must collaborate to ensure resilience of their supply chain, particularly in the critical sectors such as food, energy, health, and also how are we going to be able to become an important part of the critical minerals supply chain. This can be achieved not only by facilitating trade and movement of commodities, but also by developing better infrastructure development to reduce the cost of logistics and joint development and production of various critical minerals and technologies such as medicine, vaccine, EV battery components, and semiconductor. We need to ensure that the private sector as well as the government sector are going to be able to work together to ensure that we are focusing on how are we going to be able to develop these value chains and all of the infrastructure that will be required for that. The government only will not be able to do it. Working with the private sectors, we need to ensure that the focus is how are we going to be able to reduce the cost of logistics, particularly amongst the developing countries. Third, facilitating people-to-people contact. People-to-people contact is very crucial to supporting economic integration, promoting more trade and investments, and exchange of knowledge and expertise. We must continue to facilitate this, including through enhancing connectivity and developing networks, particularly among business people. This is why during the second Indonesia and Africa Forum, Indonesia organizes country-specific business forum and facilitates one-on-one contact amongst the private sector, particularly focusing on the 4 sectors that I mentioned just now: energy, healthcare, food and food security, as well as agriculture, as well as how are we going to be able to develop critical mineral partnerships. In addition, we must also encourage exchanges between experts and students through collaboration amongst universities and research institutions to develop our capacity building, because at the end of the day, a lot of the requirement for us to develop a better supply chain in the future is also how are we going to be able to develop the technology for that. And I would like to actually come to the 4th point, is that how are we going to be able to develop of and access to technology. Currently, we are witnessing rapid advancement of technology that transform our way of life and way of doing things. Advancement of technology has also enabled enormous value addition in sectors that are important to developing countries, including advanced manufacturing, processing of the mining products such as critical minerals, and production of essential health access, including vaccines and active pharmaceutical ingredients. And therefore, developing countries must build their technology capacity to enable structural transformation. And this is actually also very important, because on the one side, technology actually enables things, but at the same time, sometimes it is also creating more disparity amongst the ones that has the technology as opposed to the ones without the technology. So making sure that we have the developing countries to have access to technology is really also going to be a factor that will allow the developing countries to advance and reduce the disparity between the developing countries and the developed countries. This requires many things, including the development of infrastructure, research and development, human resources, skill development, particularly those related with how also are we going to be able to finance all of this technology development. Sometimes it is easy for us to discuss about technology advancement, but the crucial thing is also sometimes how are we going to be able to finance and develop the resources that will be required, particularly amongst the developing nations. So that's why transfer of technology from north-south and also amongst the south-south is also something that will be required. Developing countries must pursue cooperation amongst themselves and also with others in this area. 5th, financing. Financing is, of course, one of the most important enablers to support not only to enhance business participation in the global supply chain, but also the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Financing gap for attainment of SDGs remains huge, stands at about $2.5 to $4 trillion annually. For infrastructure development, the World Bank estimates that developing countries need to invest about 4.5% of the GDP to achieve the infrastructure that will be required for us to achieve SDGs. Funding gap is estimated to be at the multiple of trillion per year. So not only for 1 year, but also on a per year basis. We need to advance support for financing, particularly in the form of loan, concessionary financing, and also local currency lending to help to close this gap. In addition, we must promote and mobilize transition finance and treat this as the green finance, given the importance to support the transition in developing countries. And we know that there is also a big gap of this green financing that will be required. We must be careful not to fall into untenable debt burden, and continuously mobilize and scale up other sources of financing, including innovative and blended finance. So everybody, including the private sector, the government, international financial institutions, MDBs, as well as the philanthropic institutions, in addition to the private sectors, we need to actually think, how are we going to be able to do this? And therefore, the thinking about how are we going to be able to think about innovative financing in the future to allow developing countries to develop the infrastructure, develop research and development is something that we need to actually convene and discuss. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I think that making steady progress on the 5 areas that I have already mentioned will greatly contribute to redoubling the participation of the business actors, allow the developing countries to move up the value chain and increase the integration of the developing countries to the global economy, reversing the current trend of actually economic fragmentation, making them more important part of the global supply chain and achieving robust growth and sustainable development. Thank you very much, and we hope that you all will have a very productive day today in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Please remain on stage for a photo session. To join on stage for the photo session, I would like to invite Mr. Kim Eric Batcher, Director for Policy and Program Learning of Center for International Private Enterprises, CIPE, His Excellency Mr. Prudence Sebahizi, Minister of Trade and Industry, the Republic of Rwanda, Mr. Ashak Rashid, PM, Chairman of Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Kadin, Ibu Lili Yan Ing, Lead Advisor at Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia Area, Secretary General of International Economic Association, IEA, and Mr. Jose Raul Perales, Deputy Director of Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation. Right, thank you very much, Bapak Pahala Mansuri. You may return to your seat. To moderator and all panelists, please remain on stage and take your respective seats. Ladies and gentlemen, to start the thematic session, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mr. Kim Eric Batcher, Director for Policy and Program Learning of Center for International Private Enterprises, CIPE. He has taught as an adjunct professor at George Mason University School of Public Policy and was previously a research associate at Harvard Business School. Mr. Batcher holds a PhD in political science from Johns Hopkins University and a bachelor's degree from Harvard College. Mr. Kim Eric Batcher, the stage is yours.
Thank you to Indonesia for the invitation to the high-level forum. I really love how Indonesia, in putting this session together on business participation in global chains, has put the focus on economic transformation, moving up the value chains, as we heard in the keynote, and combining this with attention to improving partnerships. I truly appreciate all the participants here and your interest in this topic. The premise of this panel that we have now is that developing countries need to break the cycle of dependence on commodities and foster inclusive growth. There are opportunities for economic diversification and growth through exports and expanded participation in value chains. Now, to benefit from these opportunities, the business actors, particularly the micro, small, and medium enterprises, will need to improve their capabilities, improve their standards, meet international standards, and gain access to markets and supply chains. How will this happen? Well, this improvement will require collaboration among many actors, many stakeholders, who are not necessarily working towards the same goals. So the objectives of this session are to explore the strategies to break dependency on commodities and foster inclusive growth, and also to look at innovative collaboration to support this transformation. We have an exceptionally qualified panel for these topics. Allow me to introduce our speakers to you. His Excellency Prudence Sebahizi is Minister of Trade and Industry, Rwanda, Republic of Rwanda. He has had, among his leadership roles, leadership in the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, Department of Trade and Industry of the African Union Commission, and the Rwanda Regional Integration Committee under the Office of the President. Mr. Jose Raul Perales is Deputy Director of the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation at the Center for International Private Enterprise. He has previously served as Assistant Secretary for the Private Sector at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Director for the Americas at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Executive Vice President of the Association of American Chambers of Commerce in Latin America. Mr. Arshad Rashid is President Director of Indica Energy and the Chairman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or Kadin. He has also been the host of the B20 and Chairman of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council. Dr. Lily Yan Ing is a lead advisor at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN in East Asia. Dr. Ing also serves as Secretary General of the International Economic Association. She's had significant advisory roles to the Minister of Trade of Indonesia and the President's Office of the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome to our speakers. Well, let's begin. I would like to begin with Minister Sebahizi. I will ask you two questions, and I will begin with, as Rwanda is seeking to achieve middle income status by 2035, how do you see the role of the private sector in contributing to Rwanda's economic diversification?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Before I respond to your question, I think we have to understand the context in which Rwanda economic development survives. Rwanda being a small country that is landlocked in Africa, with a population of just 13 million people, cannot survive if we do not integrate in the regional context and continental economic market. That's why currently Rwanda is a member of the East African Community Customs Union, and we are also a member of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And by doing so, we are given access to a continental market of more than 1.4 billion people, and also more than 3.4 trillion GDP of US dollars. And this gives an opportunity for Rwanda to focus more on improving the business environment for big companies to come and establish in our country and make it a production and distribution hub for the rest of the continent. So the way the private sector contributes to our economy, we've set ambitious targets. Rwanda has been steadily progressing our economic development average to 8% over the last 10 years, and we are now projecting to achieve a steady growth of 9.3% over the next 5 years, so that we can move from where we are today to a middle-income country in 2035. Just to give you a hint, our private sector is predominated by the small and medium enterprises. 90% of our businesses are small and medium enterprises. And we have been more depending on service sector, which contributes to more than 60% of our GDP. And the second will be agriculture, which is just contributing between 25 and 30%, and then industry is there in the middle, especially manufacturing. So given the size of small and medium enterprises in our economy, our strategy is how to lift up our small and medium enterprises allow them to participate in the national market, but also connect with the regional and global value chains. And a number of initiatives have been put in place. Let me start with a few challenges that have been identified that our small and medium enterprises face. The biggest challenge is access to finance. As you all know, the capital in Africa is very expensive. Our interest rate is between 20 and 30%, the lending interest rate in the commercial banks. And small and medium enterprises cannot afford that cost of money. And not only can they not afford, but also the process of accessing a loan is very tedious, especially where the banks will ask for collateral, especially that the size of the business of SME is too small. Currently, what we define as small and medium enterprise in Rwanda is a business that will have a turnover, annual turnover, which is less than $500,000. So you can imagine if your annual turnover is less than $500,000, how can you afford a loan at 30%, 25%, and also how can you afford a collateral that will serve as a guarantee? So access to finance has been a biggest challenge. We've set up a fund, we call it a business development fund in Rwanda. And that business development fund is dedicated to supporting small and medium enterprises. And by doing that, we have reduced the cost of money that will go to SMEs. That's initiative number one. Initiative number two addresses the issue of skills, lack of capacity of our small and medium enterprises, lack of skills to meet the standards of the market. And we have established, we have developed entrepreneurship development policy, which addresses issues of capacity, including having business development advisors in all government entities, from grassroots level to the national level. So we provide constant training to our small and medium enterprises for them to have access to the market. And the third initiative, which is very important, is how do we address infrastructure challenges? Because the cost of transport and logistics in our country is more than 30% higher than the regional average. So we have invested a lot in infrastructure. We have now facilitated the connectivity of Rwanda from the port of Dar es Salaam, which is about 1,400 kilometers away from the capital, by building inland port. So we have what we call Kigali Logistics Platform, which is an inland port that will allow containers to be shipped directly from the port of Dar es Salaam to Kigali, and the number of days that would take to clear a container will be reduced tremendously. The other aspect of infrastructure that we have invested in, of course, we have established what we call industrial parks. We have 10 industrial parks across the country. And within those 10 industrial parks, we have set up necessary infrastructure that will allow our small and medium enterprises to be to start investing in manufacturing, because we think they cannot stay in services forever. It is only by investing in the manufacturing sector that our SMEs can sustain our economy.
I really like how you've drawn out multiple linkages that are necessary, whether it's regional integration, attracting the large businesses, and connecting the small businesses both internationally and nationally. As a follow-up to the interventions that you have mentioned around a fund, entrepreneurship development, and infrastructure, how do you see what's working? What are maybe some of the success factors that are important to your interventions?
The success factors, what I can tell you, today our small and medium enterprises employ more than 2.5 million people. I think that is a success factor. Of course, they also contribute to more than 50% of our GDP. But what I can tell you is that the survival rate of our small and medium enterprises is very high. We only attract investment for big companies that will build big industries that require heavy investment. But it's only our small and medium enterprises that will produce food, that will produce clothes, because we have apparel and textile industry that is quite developed. Of course, that needs to be scaled up. We have leather industry that is now growing. We have been exporting coffee and tea. So Rwanda is known for export of coffee and tea, and the coffee growers and tea growers and processors are small and medium enterprises. And coffee and tea are the biggest exports for our country.
Thank you. The small and medium enterprises are so important. Now, Mr. Perales, I will also ask you two questions. Can you tell us about how the Global Alliance for Trade Facilitation coordinates the roles of its stakeholders and its members, and does so in a way that ensures effective development cooperation?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the question. Thanks to the government of Indonesia for hosting us for this conversation. Let me, first of all, give a little history of the Global Alliance, right? We are the world's first, and to my knowledge, only public-private partnership designed to support trade reforms in different countries, right? It was created based on a novel idea that, and actually on the experience of crafting and negotiated the trade facilitation agreement of the WTO. And these ideas were that the border is a shared responsibility between governments, the regulators, and the private sector, right, the users. That the private sector possesses resources, experience, techniques, data, procedures, etc., that can help governments optimize border management. And that these capabilities in the private sector ought to have some on-ramp or institutionalized vehicle so that they can support and catalyze reforms and other TFA implementation efforts, right? So the alliance was created with 5 original donors, right? The United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, and Germany. We have 3 functionally divided, geographically spread host organizations in Geneva, Paris, and Washington, D.C. I am based in Washington. And each of these organizations brings a unique competencies and resources to the effort. We also have a network of 40+ global and international companies representing multiple approaches to border and supply chain management. So we have manufacturing, logistics, transportation, retail, agriculture, pharmaceuticals, technology. And we have a steering group comprised of some of these companies and the donors in the alliance. So why has the alliance been successful? I would say, well, of course, hard work, expectation management, persistence, willingness to bridge differences, all those things are in there. But I think there are some things in the alliance, because we are a multi-stakeholder partnership, that I think are very pertinent to this discussion. The first one is that we're all united by a common goal. When the alliance was created, different people had different views and perspectives on how this partnership would work, right? You had the corporates, right, the business sector, who sought a vehicle to advance specific reforms, to development agency, and then development agencies who sought to blanket maximalist commitments from business. So there was definitely a surplus of goodwill and a scarcity of details. But what kept people going is that both sides, business and governments, and all parties involved, share a commitment to proving that the private sector had a constructive role to play in trade reform and border management in general. So that helped keep the focus on the prize, in a manner of speaking, or for the development experts, proof of concept. The second thing I would say is that we had measurable results are key to our success too. The Alliance's mandate requires us that the output of our work be measured in terms of time and cost reductions to trade, originally for traders, but also for government officials, right? So how our work improves the administrative capacity of government agencies and resource allocation. Our mission has grown since we were created. We now deal with more supply chain management issues, productive linkages for nearshoring investments, supporting the provision of customs services for non-traditional traders and the like. But the mission to measure things and use those measurements to speak about what we do has remained paramount. And last but not least, I would say that part of our success and how we've been able to do what we do is the willingness to learn from each other and then manage expectations on the basis of that learning. So the Alliance brings together actors around two very different logics, right? You have a public goods mission from the government and the development agencies, and a private goods ethos in the private sector. So for the public sector, the original idea was that because companies make money, they should put money up to do a lot of this work because they had the financial resources. But that's not how business thinks, right? All their activities, whatever businesses do, is connected to their bottom line because they're in the business of being competitive, right? They're designed to make money and compete and invent. That's how they thrive. So development agencies had to adjust expectations about what business could do and what those private sector contributions would be all about. And these contributions were plenty and were diverse, but they were coming from a very different light than the original expectations. And the same thing happened with the private sector. For businesses, project involvement entails a sharp focus on discrete targets over a finite period of time, and that's not how development works. Much less when the objective of development work is policy change. So both sides work collaboratively, and because they set common targets with each other, that enabled both sides to see each other's point of view and better appreciate what each brought to the table on its own terms. And the learning that took place on over a bunch of things, right, over all sorts of things, from speed of projects to budgeting to project design and, of course, to expectations about results.
The Alliance is quite innovative in bringing together the corporate actors and development partners to align the expectations, like you said, around specific targets. Let's talk about inclusion. What actions is the Alliance taking to ensure the participation of diverse business actors, and especially from the developing or less developed countries?
Thank you. That's a great question because it's central to the work that we do. So, obviously, there are many things that we do. It is central to the fundamental existence of the Alliance, right? Let me just make some general points based on lessons learned from having worked over the last 8 to 9 years in 29 countries, over 35 projects, and supporting all ranges of goods and dealing with all kinds of traders. I'm going to be a little blunt, if I may be allowed. I think the biggest problem in integrating new traders or non-traditional traders to supply chains is quite simple. It's information. And this means 3 things, or I would like to say, in our experience, it means 3 things. Number 1 is access to clear, precise, and updated information about compliance requirements or new regulations. In Peru, for example, and I'm going to use examples from the work that we've done around the world, right? In Peru, which is a massive agricultural exporter, there was no digital registry for compliance requirements when a company applied for an export license for products regulated by the sanitary entity. So people paid, or small businesses paid associations, intermediaries, or lawyers to get the necessary information. That's a huge transaction cost for SMEs and a disincentive to export. Ultimately, it's the big companies that can manage this obstacle. So there you have a hindrance, right? The second thing I would say is about information is the sharing of information across government agencies. Quite simply, there is overlapping, duplicative, and often unnecessary information that government agencies demand of exporters, simply because they're not sharing information across the agencies so that they can simplify the process of customs compliance. For example, some sanitary agencies require separate product information and licenses during an import transaction that can be easily obtained from a customs declaration. But in many LDCs, these declarations are described as tax documents, so customs doesn't share them with anybody else, not even with other government agencies. And the effect, of course, is a cost to efficiency of the traders, and obviously that reflects in products and et cetera. There was a recent analysis of the OECD that, for the express sector, that found that if countries digitalize their border processes, yes, their exports can grow 5 to 6%. But if border agencies share data and coordinate it, it could lead to a 15% in export growth. So therefore, and that is basically a matter of procedures, not a matter of technology or huge investments. It's simply a question of agencies coordinating among each other, among themselves. So we like to build single windows for trade, and they sound like an answer, but without the processes to modify how agencies share information, single windows are good, but they're not going to be optimal to accomplish these goals. And finally, the fragmented information part is information across businesses. So in many countries, business associations compete for members and services and often fill gaps when there are no public versions of this information. But this creates an unnecessary barrier to entry. For example, in the Dominican Republic, there are 8 training programs for small and medium-sized enterprises to become exporters, but none of them share information with each other, which means that they don't share client lists. So there is no export registry in the country. Nobody knows what the other, or an export inventory in the country, so nobody knows what the other agency is doing. And so therefore, you cannot know what SMEs have developed or not developed, and so that means that you cannot develop what you don't know, right? So this is a question of information. 2 more things that I would say would help non-traditional traders and expand access to trade is to treat government regulation as a service. Countries where we have seen the most advances in export performances, integrating into supply chains and especially in diversifying the exporter and trader mix, like Costa Rica, are places that have found that governments take the user experience as that take it very seriously, right? And in the way that they design the policies and the procedures, as well as in the way they manage border procedures. So, for example, in Costa Rica, the single window that I was referring to a little earlier is managed by a public-private partnership that is independent from political authorities, even though government officials work in it. So what that does is that it enables both sides to shape how the processes function. I can talk about cases of Colombia where the customs has begun talking about customs regulation as a service to traders, and that the traders are clients of the customs. And we've seen some of these changes happening in Malawi, in Cambodia, through some of the work that we're doing in the Alliance. These are small changes and they take time to function, but they speak to a culture of addressing trade. And the last thing I would say in this is that in many countries, mentoring of exporters, the capacity building aspect of things, is treated as a top-down activity rather than a network of information. And what that means is that you have export promotion agencies, business associations that do trainings and mentorship programs, and while measuring the results are always hard, we don't know how companies share knowledge with each other, right? The small and medium-sized businesses themselves who have been going through this, right? That where exporting is not about making a deal, but rather a sustained set of challenges and difficulties, and managing with these unexpected things. How do companies learn from each other? And so, at that level, as I said, the idea of mentorship is important, but how this information is treated as a network can actually help build a fabric of exporters that ultimately builds more access for traders.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing these very practical lessons and suggestions from the Alliance. Turning now to Indonesia, Mr. Rashid, as a business leader, how do you see the challenges of increasing diverse business participation in global supply chains?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the Indonesian government and also greetings to all the speakers today and everyone here. First of all, we need to understand the trade wise about Indonesia, and in which Indonesia has recorded a trade surplus for 50 consecutive months, which is since May 2020. This is a good news which shows Indonesia's importance to the global market. However, we also need to remember that these trades are dependent on a few primary commodities currently, such as palm oil and iron, coal, and steel, and are traded mostly between Indonesia and also our traditional partners. This means that we are very sensitive to externalities and also price shocks, which means Indonesia will have to actually diversify its trade portfolio. And this is not just a matter of increasing more private sector participation, but also to insulate ourselves from externalities. And to do that, Indonesia will need to first is assess our modalities or our competitive advantages, as well as identifying our exposures, in particular commodities or market. And these modalities also need to be adapted with the future trends of Indonesia's economic landscape, which is labor market, technological advancement, trend of education, and also skills. And then we have to take a look and assess the regional demand. Indonesia should identify potential sectors of commodities where it could actually be competitive and be able to meet that demand. We also need to be mindful of the increasing tariff and non-tariff barriers, which actually could compel us to pursue new FTAs, PTAs with non-traditional partners and markets. While at the same time, we also need to optimize our current or existing CEPAs, PTAs, FTAs, and make sure that it is understood by the private sectors, and this is important. This is a problem of many levels, from understanding and awareness to compatibility in business application, as well as coordinating among stakeholders. Although continuous reforms have been made internally, we still need to continue and address some keys, such as inconsistent regulation, as an example, and also unmatched market incentive, which is another examples that we have. So throughout this process, we also need to view our small, medium enterprises in a different light and also take note of some of the examples from other countries as benchmarks, where small, medium enterprises could actually compete, participate in a larger value chain. So those are what we believe are the challenges that we have currently within Indonesia, and how we can actually seize that. There's a lot of important things of information, which I totally agreed. This is about how dissemination of information and how to make sure this information is especially received by our small, medium enterprises. And this is something very, very important. Just take one example. We have the Green Deal in 2030, which is all product to Europe must be green. It's great. I mean, well, all of us, I think, agree to that. We need to have green products. But it is for large corporations or large companies in Indonesia, it's quite, they are able to adapt quickly. But for small, medium enterprises, it's very challenging. Then the question is for the small enterprises. Can these small enterprises have green products? Or is it not able because it's very difficult, it's very challenging? And now the question is it okay, is it right for now small companies in Indonesia are not able to supply goods to Europe? These are things that actually becoming challenges. This is where then, the CEPAS as an example, how we can accommodate particularly for small, medium enterprises. And this is, I think, the necessary challenges, particularly that we have, considering small, medium enterprises also of Indonesia, and considering how we can participate in this global supply chain, particularly with all those rules and regulations that still leave people behind. This is something that we need to change, the value systems, the values of leaving no one behind. And that is, I think, a key important of this. That will be the main.
Thank you for the realistic assessment of the challenges, and we can always count on business to really understand what is actually possible. So what can the Chamber do? What can other actors do to assist smaller business, diverse business, improving its capabilities and its participation? And is there a role for collaboration or development cooperation?
Yeah, I mean, Kadin, as the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Indonesia, is quite unique. We are the umbrella of organization of the business community in Indonesia. So all associations in Indonesia, that is in regards to business, economy, trade, investment, and all companies belongs to the chambers. And we have a critical role to actually enhance the capability of micro, small, medium enterprises, because we have our own law. We have a law number 1, 1987, which is a Kadin law, or the Chamber's law, which actually particularly stated clearly that we have to create entrepreneurs and we have to upgrade entrepreneurs from micro to small, small to medium, medium to large. But now talking about how do we accommodate or support our small medium enterprises. First is we have created what we call Wiki Export. It's a platform whereby we actually, this is what we call entrepreneurship programs or Wiki Entrepreneurs in a way, which particularly is a program part of our ecosystem to further promote the development of Indonesia's small medium enterprises. And this is where we help emerge local businesses and help them to actually export overseas. And one example, actually, we work with Japan as an example with this Wiki Entrepreneurs, where we have Indonesian language in one side, and on the other side is actually in Japanese. And in order for us to actually help also the small medium enterprises, what we did is actually we converted many of the information into AI or a chatbot. And now the small and medium enterprises can actually access information such as, for example, on export, by using their WhatsApp, because there's a lot of WhatsApp in Indonesia. So easy for them, because one of the most important is how can anyone actually read on SEPA, for example, or any other agreements, trade agreements. It's impossible for us even to look at it. It's so big, so thick. So it's easier for us to put it onto this AI chatbot. And so the small medium enterprises can have questions in their own common language, and will have answers on how to export, as an example, to certain countries and so forth. In this example, it's Japan, as I mentioned. So we are now promoting more countries to actually be part of this, what we call the Wiki Export. And in order to help them also, we have created what we call the Indonesia Trading House. This is where we want to help our small medium enterprises, because, as in one example, as easy as a warehouse, if small medium enterprises have to go out overseas and actually take a large warehouse, they won't be able to do it. So in order to create this economic of scales, rather than that, we step in as a chambers and we say, okay, we'll have this Indonesia Trading House, we'll have the warehouses, so they can put some of their products there, and so they can be accessed or can be sold to the local market overseas. So this is one of another key things that we are doing, what we call the Indonesian Trading House. As part of that platform, what we call the Wiki Entrepreneurs, where we have Wiki Export, and then also we have these trading houses. And by doing this at the same time, we are actually, in a way, upgrading them. Upgrading our small medium enterprises. Now, they are able to actually sell overseas, export. The easy one part is actually another one, which is just putting them in digital form and how to be able to participate and be part of the e-commerce ecosystems. And this is another way of actually doing it. As part of that, we also created what we call Sekolah Export, which is export schools, whereby this is where people who want to come and attend this kind of schools and to understand better how to export. And this is what we are actually doing. And another one is actually to encourage all small and medium enterprises. We've created what we call the Kadin Impact Awards, so that we award them. We award in giving them the celebration that if they can export, because we need to encourage. And with this, actually, among them, there will be a competition to say, yes, I want to export, I do want to export. And this is the way for us currently to encourage them to do what we call being participation even to these global supply chains per se. Yeah. So that's what we are doing at the chambers currently.
Well, the chamber is doing a lot, and from an outside view, I see that Indonesia really does have kind of this growth in small business exports, so it's quite exciting to see. Dr. Lilianing, tell us, as an economist, how do you see the strategies for ASEAN to take advantage of diversification, to take advantage of particular sectors or opportunities globally?
Thank you to the government of Indonesia for providing platforms for all of us to have constructive discussions. I think all the panelists have laid down a very good comments, so I can just follow this up. ASEAN, as we all know, Southeast Asia, we have vast potentials, starting from natural resources to labor-intensive sectors. But the thing is that we cannot always rely on these sectors, as we will experience fluctuating in commodity prices and competitions from other developing countries. So if we see from the last 40 years, there has been efforts to increase value added as well as to increase our integrations to global value chains. And I can see there are at least two promising sectors. First is the semiconductor industry. Over the last 5 years, ASEAN's exports of goods increased about 26% from $1.4 trillion in 2018 to $1.8 trillion in 2023. And the top ASEAN's exported products were machineries, electronics, including semiconductors, fuels and oils, and mechanical appliances. Okay? ASEAN semiconductors increased from $52 billion in 2017 to $269 billion in 2023. So it increased more than 5 times just within this period. And currently, ASEANs contribute about 25% of the global semiconductor exports. So that's something that we can see a huge potential for ASEANs, and particularly considering the current geopolitical tensions between the US and China. The second potential sector for ASEAN is digital sector. ASEAN has a population of 679 million, of which 70% of populations are internet users. In 2023, the digital economy in ASEAN was recorded at 259 billion US dollar and is projected to reach 1 trillion US dollar by 2030. Just to give you an illustration, currently the Indonesian's economy is 1.4 trillion US dollar. So that's how big the digital economy in ASEAN will be by 2023. So these two sectors, semiconductors and digital economy, are two potential sectors for Southeast Asia to grow and to leverage its value added. So I think the key of the success of these two sectors is the combinations between physical and digital infrastructure, as well as this is the highlight of the importance to develop human capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Now, a few of our speakers have talked about the knowledge gaps that are a barrier to participation. Can you tell us a little more about what the specific gaps are and who can address those?
That's interesting questions. I mean, ASEAN has having knowledge gap within and across ASEAN's countries, and that's very important. Let's us move forward on what would be the good strategy for ASEAN to handle these issues. I think one is, as Pak Arshad mentions, one is the partnerships, public-private partnerships. The thing is that so far, not only ASEAN's, most of developing countries, when we discuss about knowledge gaps, many of the governments start with building, literally building physical training centers for workers or potentials or students. This is something that the government should shift its mindset. What we need now, it's not a physical training centers. In fact, in developing countries, about 40 to 50% of physical training centers are not occupied at all. And many of them have very little occupancy rates and have been used in a very minimum way. So this is something that the government should collaborate with academic and private sectors to design such curriculums that are matched with the demand. And this is something that the government should also work together with other partners to ensure that the curriculums, the appliances, the tools are updated enough to meet the current challenge, to meet the current skill and required talents. That's number one. Number two is regional collaborations initiatives. ASEAN can have ASEAN Center for Excellence or Innovations Hub. Again, it doesn't have to be physical center. It can be just a center like Center for Hub, where all Southeast Asian countries can access trainings, improving their knowledge, and other transfer of technologies through this Center of Excellence of Hub. Let me give you two simple observations from Taiwan and South Korea, which are among the largest semiconductors and advanced technology powerhouses these days. Taiwan started building Hsinchu Park. It's kind of an innovation hub where allows students, workers to work together and to give them incentive to innovate. So that's as early as back to 1980s. That was kind of the incumbent for Taiwan to develop its semiconductor. And now Taiwan has Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, which is contributing about 50% of global semiconductors. It's one of the largest semiconductor industries. Another example is South Korea, as we know with the Han Miracle, showing how fast industrializations in Korea, which is largely also based on semiconductors industries, making South Korea is developing this kind of innovation centers along the Han River that is now kind of incumbent for Samsung and SK Hynix to become major players in semiconductors and microchips. So that's some things that ASEAN countries can learn to emulate.
So is there a favorite center or program that you're excited about?
Well, I think like, because ASEAN, probably Singapore, Malaysia, the two relatively more advanced countries compared to other countries in terms of semiconductors and other value-added industries, I think they may start leading these discussions, as well as Indonesia for sure. So Indonesia, 60% of Indonesia populations are in labor force. We have huge potential to tap into these value chains. So I think it's just about the collaborations, how ASEANs can be more integrated and leverage the integrations to become a powerhouse in these industries.
Well, thank you very much. I've learned so much from this panel. You know, I'm not a trade specialist, and you're really giving us both sort of a comprehensive view, but some very practical ideas. We have time, I believe, for 2 quick questions from the participants. If you would like to ask a question, raise your hand and we will bring a microphone to you. Okay, I see a hand, the lady over here. I ask you to please introduce yourself and, as always, end your question with a question mark.
Thank you. Nicole Henry from the Australian Government Councillor to Jakarta. There was a lot of conversation around culture and how that impacts from a perspective of innovation. And the SMEs that we want to grow and develop are often time and resource constrained, so that makes it very challenging to make those investments. We talked about culture from a policy and trade expansion perspective, but quite often that can be difficult when you have regulators who have a different objective. But then if you have a culture that is around innovation and investment and R&D that's both public and private, I'm really interested in the panel's views on whether there's an opportunity for developing countries here to leapfrog from a systems perspective if we're looking at customs and the challenges at the border, if we're looking at what it means to have that cultural norms within your community around what it means to invest. Is there an opportunity here for these developing countries to actually leapfrog, and what is the role of business in supporting and facilitating that growth?
Thank you so much. So we have a question around culture, which I think includes organizational culture, whether it's the regulators' culture, the small business culture, where does innovation fit, and are there opportunities to leapfrog? I think any panelist who's interested can address this question. Roll.
So this could have a very long answer, but just let me give you a very quick one. Yes, there are opportunities of leapfrogging. I think the question about leapfrogging is in proportion to your objective, right? What is it exactly that you're trying to leapfrog towards? Because, for example, many times government authorities and even businesses set themselves up to try to imitate standards or things that happen in other countries that, while great, they haven't internalized how exactly is it that they're going to make it work for themselves. Let me give you an example from our own work. I mentioned the single window in Costa Rica. The Costa Rican single window is designed after the Singaporean one. So Costa Ricans went and looked at the best single window that they could do in the world, right? They looked at the Singaporean one. Obviously, Costa Rica was not going to be Singapore, right? Not immediately. Their trade position was very different, et cetera, et cetera. But what they said was, what version of this can we do with the resources that we have here? What is it from this that we want to learn? How do they organize themselves to learn the lessons that they wanted to learn from this, right? And give themselves a structure about what learning meant. So indeed, they adapted that to a very Costa Rican product. I mean, the single window in Costa Rica is very uniquely designed, very locally designed, and very locally owned. They didn't leapfrog Singapore, but they leapfrogged every other country in their neighborhood. And it's the only country in Latin America, for example, that has 100% of their border processes inside the single window, which is what we say these windows are all about. So it's a question of objective. What exactly is it that you're targeting, and where are you leapfrogging to? That makes the difference, I would say.
All right. Would anyone else like to address? Doctor?
Okay. Let me give you another example. I totally agree that China, in the early days, during its developments, Deng Xiaoping learned from Lee Kuan Yew at the time. Back to the 1980s, the strategy is that China will not be able to change China to become Singapore. But China will gonna have 7 Singapore in China. And that's how it's initiated with special economic zones, with to improving municipality, and to adopt meritocracy systems in China in those 7 pioneer centers or special economic zones. That's the strategy that China adopted. Again, it's the same. Korea, in the beginning of developments, Korea also think that Korea will not gonna be able to change Korea to become the US. But Korea can be center of excellence. That's how Korea start to invest a lot in education system. And as we can see, for the last 40 years right now, Korea has among the highest education level. So when you're asking about the norms, I think we need to develop institutions that is very disciplined. I know it sounds very fake. That is anti-corruption. Why it is very important with anti-corruption? It's gonna affect the whole story of resource allocations. And that's something I totally agree. Whether countries can be leapfrogging, I think it really depends on the norms, on how a country built its institutions as a whole. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Rashid.
Sure, I just want to add something. I mean, I totally agree with both speakers. So for me, if look at digitalization, I think that's when we talk about the enablers of leapfrogging. That's how Indonesia sees this. That's why in every aspect of our business life today, we are actually promoting digitalization, whether it is through micro, small, medium enterprises, and to all large corporations. As simple as payment system, digital payment systems. How we are actually developing in Indonesia, not only Indonesia, but within ASEAN. Just last year, we actually established now that, signing payment system that you can do with QR code all over ASEAN. And so right now, Indonesian can go to Thailand and to have a QR code for payment systems. Same thing from Thailand and so forth, and among all these ASEAN. It seems simple, but actually that's the gate to what we call leapfrogging. So in a way, this is one part that I think in Indonesia and ASEAN, we are pushing for digitalization, in all aspects of our business life. And with that, we do believe that if we can accelerate our economic growth, and we can actually be able to understand more each other of all the information or even culture in a way from various things. And this is the way to actually move forward and for all the businesses in Indonesia to be more, you can say, be innovative and agile, perhaps. I think that's just to add to what the two speakers mentioned.
Mr. Minister, would you like to add anything to this question or any other point you'd like to make?
I just want to agree with the my predecessors and also at the impact of technology in facilitating the businesses of small and medium enterprises. In Rwanda, we do have what we call e-government. We have one platform which can be used to access all government services, all of them, whether payment, whether going through different processes to get the certificates. All of them can be obtained just using one government platform, which I think is a good practice that we have, of course, borrowed from developed world. So Leapfrog can apply, more importantly, in ICT and new technologies. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to move to summarize some of the insights, and this has been such a packed session, I can't possibly cover it all. Some takeaways are that there are indeed so many opportunities in ASEAN for countries on the frontier. There are opportunities in digital sectors and semiconductors, energy, healthcare, agriculture, minerals, logistics. The opportunities are out there if you sort through your competitive advantage. I really like that every speaker has given us practical examples of initiatives and innovations to take. Among them, a service orientation for eGov, for entrepreneur business advisors, having an export inventory, using chatbots to share trade information, requirements, opportunities, markets, and rethinking not only sectors, but where you're assisting and engaging. So training centers can innovate and be digital or off-site, and innovation hubs and so on. So many practical suggestions here. Themes that I'm hearing are three I would offer. First, that we need to think broadly about business. When we think about business, we have to think about the larger exporters and corporates. We have to think about the small business, so important, and the entrepreneurs. We have to think about the innovators. We also have to think about those who are serving their communities. And as we're seeking future opportunities, remember that we need to think about which businesses are going to be in the sectors of the future. Secondly, we do need to think comprehensively about interventions. Of course, each intervention has to be well defined, but we have to address finance, regulatory barriers, access to markets, information, and so forth. If you address one of the challenges and not one of the other binding constraints, you won't get the results. So I've talked about speaking broadly, but we also need focus. Focus in working together. How do we have processes to encourage coordination, collaboration, and tighter linkages so that business and government and other important stakeholders can pursue this dream of moving up the value chain? Thank you for your attention. Please join me in congratulating our speakers.
Thank you, moderator, and all panelists for the very insightful discussion. You may return to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have a short break and we'll start the second session with the theme Innovate to Elevate, multi-stakeholder partnership for promoting higher economic value at the region level at 11 a.m.
Indonesia, a nation of remarkable diversity, strength, and vision, stands at the crossroads of global development. As a committed global partner, Indonesia has played a significant role in shaping the future of international cooperation. Through the High-Level Forum on Multi-Stakeholder Partnership, HLF MSP, Indonesia has been a leading voice in advocating for inclusive partnerships. This forum brings together governments, civil society, the private sector, and international organizations working hand in hand to tackle the world's most pressing development challenges. Indonesia has championed the importance of collaboration, ensuring that no one is left behind in the pursuit of sustainable development. Our nation's leadership in HLF MSP exemplifies our dedication to fostering dialogue and creating lasting solutions through stronger South-South and Triangular Cooperation, SSTC, sustainable economy, and innovative financing. In parallel, Indonesia's role in SSTC has set a benchmark for solidarity among developing nations. From education to healthcare, agriculture to infrastructure, Indonesia has shared its expertise, empowering other nations to thrive. By participating in SSTC, Indonesia demonstrates the power of shared knowledge and mutual assistance, reinforcing our commitment to building a more equitable and connected world. As a co-chair representing dual-role countries in Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, GPEDC, Indonesia has been actively promoting principles of effective development, cooperation at the global and national level. These principles including to ensure the country ownership, focusing on results, inclusive partnerships, as well as transparency and mutual accountability. Indonesia's leadership in GPEDC reflects our commitment to effective development cooperation as a key in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and creating a better future for all. Through the High-Level Forum on Multi-Stakeholder Partnership, Indonesia will continue to champion inclusive, innovative, and effective partnerships that deliver real impact. In this pivotal role, Indonesia will guide global discussions and catalyze collaborative action to ensure that development cooperation becomes a beacon of hope for all nations. Indonesia's journey is one of collaboration, leadership, and progress. Together with the world, we will continue to build a future where development knows no boundaries. Indonesia, a nation of remarkable diversity, strength, and vision, stands at the crossroads of global development. As a committed global partner, Indonesia has played a significant role in shaping the future of international cooperation. Through the High-Level Forum on Multi-Stakeholder Partnership, HLF MSP, Indonesia has been a leading voice in advocating for inclusive partnerships. This forum brings together governments, civil society, the private sector, and international organizations working hand in hand to tackle the world's most pressing development challenges. Indonesia has championed the importance of collaboration, ensuring that no one is left behind in the pursuit of sustainable development. Our nation's leadership in HLF MSP exemplifies our dedication to fostering dialogue and creating lasting solutions through stronger South-South and Triangular Cooperation, SSTC, sustainable economy, and innovative financing. In parallel, Indonesia's role in SSTC has set a benchmark for solidarity among developing nations. From education to healthcare, agriculture to infrastructure, Indonesia has shared its expertise, empowering other nations to thrive. By participating in SSTC, Indonesia demonstrates the power of shared knowledge and mutual assistance, reinforcing our commitment to building a more equitable and connected world. As a co-chair representing dual-role countries in Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, GPEDC, Indonesia has been actively promoting principles of effective development, cooperation at the global and national level. These principles including to ensure the country ownership, focusing on results, inclusive partnerships, as well as transparency and mutual accountability. Indonesia's leadership in GPEDC reflects our commitment to effective development cooperation as a key in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and creating a better future for all. Through the High-Level Forum on Multi-Stakeholder Partnership, Indonesia will continue to champion inclusive, innovative, and effective partnerships that deliver real impact. In this pivotal role, Indonesia will guide global discussions and catalyze collaborative action to ensure that development cooperation becomes a beacon of hope for all nations. Indonesia's journey is one of collaboration, leadership, and progress. Together with the world, we will continue to build a future where development knows no boundaries. Indonesia, a nation of remarkable diversity, strength, and vision, stands at the crossroads of global development. As a committed global partner, Indonesia has played a significant role in shaping the future of international cooperation. Through the High-Level Forum on Multi-Stakeholder Partnership, HLF MSP, Indonesia has been a leading voice in advocating for inclusive partnerships. This forum brings together governments, civil society, the private sector, and international organizations working hand in hand to tackle the world's most pressing development challenges. Indonesia has championed the importance of collaboration, ensuring that no one is left behind in the pursuit of sustainable development. Our nation's leadership in SSTC, sustainable economy, and innovative financing. In parallel, Indonesia's role in SSTC has set a benchmark for solidarity among developing nations. From education to healthcare, agriculture to infrastructure, Indonesia has shared its expertise, empowering other nations to thrive.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the second thematic parallel session, Innovate to Elevate, Multi-Stakeholder Partnership for Promoting Higher Economic Value at the Regional Level. I am Valerina Daniel, your Master of Ceremony. To start this session, we would like to kindly invite His Excellency Mr. Francisco Aguilera Aranda, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Kingdom of Spain to the Republic of Indonesia and to ASEAN, to deliver his speech. Please welcome His Excellency Mr. Francisco Aguilera Aranda.
Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por esta invitación a estar presente en este importante seminario. En un mundo cada vez más unido por su interconexión, la búsqueda del desarrollo sostenible requiere más que esfuerzos individuales, exige una acción colectiva robusta. España, con su firme compromiso con la cooperación internacional, ejemplifica cómo las asociaciones entre múltiples actores pueden ser aprovechadas para elevar el valor económico a nivel regional. Hoy quisiera explorar cómo las contribuciones estratégicas que España, especialmente a través del concepto de apoyo oficial total al desarrollo sostenible, demuestran nuestro empeño por mejorar los resultados del desarrollo en África, en Asia, en el Pacífico o en América Latina. Un desafío fundamental en muchas regiones en desarrollo es la absorción y utilización efectiva de las tecnologías modernas. Aunque estas tecnologías ofrecen un potencial transformador, su impacto a menudo está limitado por las capacidades locales. La participación de España en África proporciona un ejemplo convincente de cómo se pueden abordar estos desafíos. Por ejemplo, España ha invertido en proyectos de energía solar en África Occidental, no solo introduciendo nuevas tecnologías, sino utilizando el TOSSD para capturar y reportar el espectro completo de apoyo proporcionado. Esto incluye financiación para programas de capacitación local y el establecimiento de redes de mantenimiento. Al incorporar estos elementos en nuestro marco, España asegura que las tecnologías no solo se introduzcan, sino que sean sostenibles y utilizadas efectivamente por las comunidades locales. En Asia, el papel de España va más allá de la mera provisión de tecnología. En Filipinas, por ejemplo, el apoyo español ha sido útil para modernizar las prácticas agrícolas. A través del TOSSD, España ha podido documentar y mejorar una participación en proyectos que introducen sistemas de riego avanzados, duplicando los rendimientos de arroz en algunas áreas. Estos esfuerzos se complementan con iniciativas de fortalecimiento de capacidades que ayudan a los agricultores locales a gestionar y mantener esas tecnologías. Al integrar estas actividades en los informes de TOSSD, España muestra un enfoque integral para la transferencia de tecnología que fortalece las capacidades de absorción y asegura beneficios a largo plazo. Las cadenas de valor regionales son otra área vital en las que la contribución en que mi país está teniendo un impacto significativo. A través de TOSSD, España ha demostrado su compromiso con el fortalecimiento de estas cadenas, particularmente en América Latina. En Colombia, las inversiones españolas han ido más allá de mejorar las técnicas de producción de café. También han introducido el establecimiento de instalaciones de procesado locales y canales de comercialización. Al aprovechar el TOSSD para capturar y reportar estas actividades, España resalta cómo los esfuerzos colaborativos con socios locales pueden aumentar el valor capturado por los pequeños productores y estimular el crecimiento económico regional. El impacto del compromiso de España en África es igualmente notable. En la industria de anacardos de África Occidental, España ha apoyado la transición de la exportación de nueces crudas por el procesamiento local. Este cambio, documentado a través de TOSSD, no solo ha creado empleo, sino que también ha retenido más valor económico dentro de la región. Al centrarse en el fortalecimiento de capacidades y formar asociaciones estratégicas, España demuestra cómo las colaboraciones efectivas entre múltiples actores pueden fomentar el desarrollo regional y la resiliencia. En el Pacífico, Contribuciones de España a las pesquerías sostenibles ejemplifican el poder de las asociaciones entre múltiples actores. A través de TUSSD, España ha apoyado iniciativas regionales que mejoren las técnicas de procesamiento del pescado y el acceso a mercados internacionales. Estos esfuerzos, reflejados en los informes, ayudan a fortalecer las economías locales al tiempo que promueven la sostenibilidad ambiental. El papel que mi país pueda tener en estas asociaciones subraya la importancia de integrar el desarrollo económico con la gestión ambiental. El compromiso de España va más allá de los resultados inmediatos. Se trata de fomentar asociaciones duraderas que se adapten a las necesidades cambiantes. Durante la pandemia del COVID-19, por ejemplo, España movilizó rápidamente recursos para apoyar los sistemas de salud en América Latina y el Caribe, y con estos esfuerzos plenamente reflejados en los informes de este tipo de proyectos. Esta adaptabilidad destaca la capacidad de España para responder y fortalecer las capacidades regionales, asegurando un acceso equitativo a los beneficios del desarrollo. En conclusión, el uso del TUSSD por parte de España ejemplifica un enfoque estratégico hacia la cooperación internacional basado en los principios de asociación, fortalecimiento de capacidades y sostenibilidad. Al aprovechar el apoyo total al desarrollo sostenible para documentar y mejorar nuestras contribuciones, España demuestra cómo las asociaciones entre múltiples actores pueden abordar los desafíos de la adopción de tecnología, fortalecer las cadenas de valor regionales y garantizar que los beneficios del desarrollo sean compartidos ampliamente. Sigamos construyendo sobre estos ejemplos, trabajando juntos para crear un futuro en el que cada región pueda prosperar y el desarrollo sostenible sea una realidad para todos. Muchas gracias.